awakening, an enlightenment, a renaissance, call it whatever you want, amongst Muslims, in the way they look upon their religion. Some people are not aware of it, by the way. And what really made this revolution happen is the availability of information. This is a big thing. Now, this wasn't available to us before. What made this available? The internet technology. This is an amazing facilitator, enabler of an awakening amongst many Muslims. By the way, this has parallel to the printing of the Mus'haf. The Ottomans did not allow printing of the Mus'haf, I believe, for 400 years. It had to be only copied, because when the printing press came in Europe, the Ottomans looked at it as something evil that should not be used for printing the Mus'haf. Okay, so who knows? Maybe this had to do with the retardation of Muslims for many centuries, or not literally the retardation with respect to other people around the world. So, anyways, so in summary, I would say that we really need to parse things carefully, and I'm not saying anything that contradicts what you're saying, but there are many aspects to this subject.
Yeah, that's a very good response. Well, we're going to bring on a call in from Apollonian, who is a Christian philosopher who finds a kind of a synthesis between his Christianity and classical philosophy in the notion of the logos, and he's curious about Islamic philosophy and Islamic thought, and so I thought he could check in and maybe hear what you have to say about it. And so I think that our studio is calling him now. Maybe they already have. I don't know. Let's just check. So Apollonian, are you there? Apo, hello. Well, looks like he's not yet. So that's the cue to Mr. Rowe in the control booth to go ahead and bring him on. Maybe I might be able to do it. Let me see. I probably. Oh, there he is. I think he's coming on. Hello, Apollonian. Let me. You see, there's a little icon that he's there, but doesn't sound like he is. Let's see if I can find a way to bring him in. Hello, is that you, Apollonian? No, maybe not. Okay, well, in that case, we can continue this conversation a little bit. I can mention that what he's curious about is the Islamic interface with philosophy, and he wonders, he has a sort of a Christian philosophy, again based on this notion of logos, which is a classical Greek concept that was then adopted by Christians, and it kind of merges the ideas of logic and the divine in a certain sense. And so maybe, Omar, you could tell us a little bit about the Islamic approach to philosophy and your critique of how Muslims have drifted away from critical reflection.
Sure. I don't believe, the adjective Islamic, it doesn't exist in the Mus'haf. There's no adjective to economics. It's not added to economics, to politics, to philosophy. Now, the Mus'haf by itself gives us a way to try to understand the world. It helps us. It's a pointer. It's a guide. It is not everything, but it is the beginning, the key elements to understand the world, so that one can have a comfortable heart, a comfortable mind. Comfortable mind is something that some may refer to it as an Islamic perspective or an Islamic philosophy. Okay, so Islam is a religion that, according, by the way, when I say Islam is a religion, I always have my reference being the Mus'haf, nothing else. I'm not referring to what Al-Ghazali said or to what Ibn Khaldun said. These are luminaries that the West love to talk about much. I'm not talking about these. I'm talking about the Mus'haf and nothing but the Mus'haf as a reference. The Mus'haf as a reference encourages Muslims to think, to ponder deeply, to travel, to be scientists. So the way I joke sometimes, I say God, the name of our God in Islam is Allah. Allah is a name. God means deity. Okay. So Allah is not a philosopher. He sent, and I'll explain. He sent I'm not belittling philosophy, but Allah is not a philosopher. He sent us guidance, and he sent us guidance, and to validate the message that he sent embodied in the Quran or by the Quran, he pointed to material things. Very important point. Okay, very important point. He pointed to material, observable things. So to demonstrate the validity of the message that he sent, he pointed to material things, i.e. observable phenomena. And observable phenomena is available to every human being. Every human being. Whereas a philosophical argument is not available to every human being. Okay? So now, of course, when we talk about philosophy, we have to define what we mean by philosophy. I like to demystify things, and I look at philosophy as a way to think about things, a way to understand things, a methodology to put things together. Okay, not necessarily, I don't become a philosopher by studying Plato or Socrates and Nietzsche and Kant and all of that. I don't believe in that. Okay, so Islam is a religion that it encourages thinking under whatever you may call it, philosophy, science, or whatever. Encourages people to think, to ponder, to synthesize, literally. Look. To synthesize, to analyze, and to synthesize. Analyze, يتفكرون, a word that is repeated in the Mus'haf, to analyze. And to synthesize, a word which the Quran uses, the Mus'haf uses, يعقلون, to synthesize. And يتدبرون, to follow that trail.
No, I thought يتدبرون was to sort of ponder or reflect.
يتدبرون is from dubur. These are different words, meaning having different meanings. يتدبرون, يتفكرون, يعقلون.
Right.
You see, they have different roots. If you go back to the roots, one, يتفكرون, to analyze. When you give something the first thing you give something, the simplest thing is to ask a student to analyze. The more the advanced the student goes in his studies or her studies, you give them something to synthesize. You ask them to synthesize. يتدبرون is different. يتدبرون from following the trails. Follow the trails. Keep making the connections until you reach something. Okay, so the Mus'haf is extremely specific in the choice of words. Now, and that's why, not to discourage people, but that's why translating the Mus'haf into English is a very dangerous exercise. It's a very dangerous exercise. I'm not. It's just like if I tell you, want to study differential equations, okay? Students in the first year in college master differential equations. Well, guess what? They have to study calculus. I mean, that's it. And not to alienate any of your speakers, differential equations describe nature. this is a fact. Differential equations describe, in other words, if Newton didn't discover calculus, guess what? I think many people would have discovered, not invented. There's a difference. Newton discovered calculus. It's a natural thing. Okay? So differential equations describe nature the way I describe a physical bridge, how the bridge functions, or how a rocket goes into space is through differential equations. And Allah's words are expressed in a language that evolved naturally over thousands of years. God did not use a man-made language to express himself. He expressed himself through the observables, i.e. nature, and hence this language is an evolution. It developed in an evolutionary way that is a natural manifestation of humans' evolution and the way they developed language in a natural way, but not to deviate. So there's people try. I'll tell you something interesting, Kevin. There are forces, not necessarily mischievous, sometimes innocent, sometimes stupid, sometimes something else. Forces that I think embedded in human nature to try to divide us. To divide us. Of course, I'm sure you know that this is the case amongst Muslims. Muslims, they don't wait for a foreigner, an enemy, to divide them, right? They're excellent in creating divisions amongst themselves. But also, there are forces to say, oh, you're a philosopher, so you're a side, you're different from me. No, we have different perspectives of looking at reality and understand our life. Some economists, they may argue that, look, it's about economy after all. It's about money and making money to have shelter and to have a progeny and so forth. Other people who are in politics, they look at life as about power. I have power. I can do everything. Other people look at morality. I don't like to create these divisions. Absolutely. I think all of us, we may have strengths in looking at the world. We may have different perspectives that we think is the right perspective. And that should not divide us. That not should divide us at all. So this dichotomy, philosophers versus this versus that, I find it to be not helpful because of the complexity of nature, not the difficulty of understanding nature. There's a difference. Nature is not difficult to understand, but it's complex. And when, just like when you look at an aircraft, a huge Boeing, okay? A huge Boeing aircraft is a very complex system. But if you divide it, guess what? You find it is not that complex, that difficult if you divide it. The landing gear, the flaps, this and that. So it's a complex system. So I think life, we have to realize life is complex. When we realize that, it means different perspectives that need to be brought along in a friendly, non-antagonistic, not hostile way, to really try to make the best sense of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about the history of the encounter between philosophy and the Islamic thought that either rejected it or relegated it to a secondary question, of course, the famous conflict between Al-Ghazali, who wrote The Incoherence of the Philosophers, and then Ibn Rushd, who answered with The Incoherence of the Incoherence. And that debate has been going on ever since, and it seems that the pro-philosopher side is generally more in a minority position, and that most of the religious authorities and scholars tend to side with al-Ghazali's position, at least in the so-called Sunni Muslim world.
I think that this is blown out of proportion. I think I really, to be frank with you, Kevin, I really, if you were to ask the question, this debate between the philosophers at that time, I'm being frank with you, and I'm at the same time asking in a naive way, what impact did it have on the evolution of Muslim thought? I hear people talking a lot about al-Ghazali and Ibn Rushd, Ibn Arabi, and all of that. Al-Ghazali flip-flopped several times, in his journey. Be it, I'm not trying to put him down, okay? Al-Ghazali, I'm going to come to this big question that you raised, the relationship and the whether there's a conflict or not. But why Muslims are engrossed, or even Western academics are thrilled about these venturing in Al-Ghazali? Al-Ghazali and Ibn Rushd and Ibn Arabi lived in a very faraway time. They did not know what we know nowadays. They did not know about the galaxies. They did not know about the physics that we know. They did not know about the quantum physics, about the quarks. None of that. Where do they fit? I can study them as historical things, as historical figures, fine, in a class of history, but I don't find them, sorry, I'm being frank, I hope not abrasive, I don't find them relevant to a class of religion. I'm sorry. Unless that class has to do with these men in particular. But going back to this schism or this earlier conflict between the conflict between free thinking, because typically philosophy implies free thinking, right? Versus conservatives who follow what they've been told. This free thinking movement was very old in Muslims' history. It popped in the 1st century Hijri, which means almost 1,300 years ago, i.e., the emergence of what later became known in a derogatory way by their enemies, the Mu'tazilites. Okay, the Mu'tazilites were free thinkers. They're the first thinkers, in my opinion, as far as the records that have reached us tells me, they were the first free thinkers within the Muslims' domain. Those so-called Mu'tazilites, Mu'tazilites mean from someone who, split from the community, decided to take to leave the community. Ya'tazil, okay?
Yeah, schismatics would be one translation.
Maybe, yeah. Those people were not Mu'tazila. They were in the thick of things. They were the philosophers of the day. They were the first philosophers in Muslims' history, in my opinion, because they started asking the big questions. They started asking them. Okay, and I believe some of the questions, you may be surprised to hear me saying this, some of the questions that they raised have been answered only in the last 30 years. Only.
Interesting. Which ones?
Very simple. When they said, wait a minute, this Mus'haf the Mus'haf is claiming that it was already written in the Lawh al-Mahfuz. It was revealed, right? In other words, it is documenting everything when it was revealed. Yet, they say, it documented events that happened at the time of the Prophet. How can you reconcile this? Right? I mean,
so the Lawh al-Mahfuz is the preserved tablet for the benefit of our listeners who don't speak Arabic.
Yeah. In other words, how can a revelation come down that is documenting what is happening at that time, and what is being documented has been written long time ago. So it's a play. It's what was happening at the time of the Prophet. It was planned in advance. So why condemn the mushrikeen, the polytheists? Why condemn those who fought against the Prophet? Why do you condemn those who denied the message if it was all written in advance? Do you see? Right? Do you see? They asked very important questions. When Allah documented, when the Mus'haf documented the events around the Prophet, okay, they happened, and the Mus'haf documented them. They said, wait a minute, but wasn't it revealed already with in advance, having everything in it? Having everything that happened at that time written in it in advance? It's a very logical question. Very logical question. So these are, and then the issue of predestination. The issue of predestination. All these, these are deep questions, Kevin. This is not a joke. This is not how to pray and how to flip your finger when you pray. After all, the Mus'haf didn't talk about these things. Right? How much you give zakah. The Mus'haf didn't talk about how much you give zakah, but he said give zakah. Right? Mm-hmm. You see? So if you make $1 a day, 10 cents zakah is too much for you. If you make $50 million a year, 30 million is not too much for you to pay zakah. So Allah did not, interfere in these modalities. But the big questions, these Mu'tazilites asked these big questions, and guess what? And they were fought harshly. They were fought very harshly. They were ridiculed, and they eventually did not prevail. Who knows? Maybe all their writings were purged, were burned. Okay. This is the philosophy that one should look at, rather than, in my opinion, Al-Ghazali's work. In my opinion, again, I
think on the most basic questions, the Mu'tazilites were wrong, and Al-Ghazali was right. In that most basic question, again, goes back to what I mentioned earlier, that the perception of value, or of anything really, precedes all reflection on it, and is more basic and ultimately more important than any reflection on it or critique of it, and that all critique, all reflection, everything that goes by names like logic and philosophy and so on, all of that is secondary. And so the Mu'tazilites are said to have, as in my understanding anyway, they argued that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is restricted to the laws of logic. And that actually, I think, is a form of shirk, because it amounts to deifying and worshiping the laws of logic, which we won't call them human creations, they're human discoveries, but they're part of Allah's creation. They're certainly not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. And so I think Al-Ghazali understood this, and he understood it through a direct mystical experience, which taught him infinitely more than anybody would ever get from a vast number of lifetimes of studying logic and philosophy and so on. Because again, the direct experience of the real, the true, it precedes and is more important and vastly richer than the secondary reflections and critiques of it.
Well, you see, here we're talking about. It's hard to grab the discussion in a proper way from my end, because we're talking about generalities. If we talk about morality, values may include according to some morality. There are certain moral values that I think are inherent to our makeup as humans, and those don't change. Now, if we're talking about other things that may be perceived as values, they may fall under ma'ruf. Ma'ruf is what is common and acceptable to that particular society. And notice that the Prophet was asked to command the ma'ruf. Yes, interesting. He was not asked to command what is right. And you see, there's a lot of relativism here. A lot of relativism. This is the u'mur bil urf. Command. Wow, this is strong. Never asked him to command what is right. What is right is different from what is the truth, and is different from what is ma'ruf. Okay, so when we talk about values and morality and all of that, I think we're kind of using an umbrella to cover many things, but we should parse things. Let's get to logic.
We only have less than a minute to do it, though, because we're almost at the end of the hour.
Sure. Well, I just quickly say that the laws that have to do with morality and penal codes, they're not logical in the Mus'haf, by the way. They're not logical. Okay? They're not logical. Sometimes it's very logical if you're very hungry to go and steal. No society will accept that.
I don't think that's logical. I think that precedes logic. Logic is secondary. The first, you're hungry, you want food, there's some food, you grab it. It has nothing to do with logic.
Exactly. Yeah, but that is, this is a question where one thinks about what is logical. That story of the 4 people who sailed and they killed one of them to survive. When they reached the shores of the UK, they were tried and sentenced. But it is very logical to kill one of them, because 3 would survive rather than 4 would die. So yes, sometimes there's that conflict between logic and the laws of God. Okay, but it seems like we're running out of time. I can see I can hear the music in the back.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to leave it there, but we should definitely pick it up in the future at some point. This is a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much, Omar Ramahi. It's wonderful to hear from you, and people should check out MuslimsGreatestChallenge.com to find out more. Kevin Barrett here. TruthJihad.com is the website. See you next time.
Thank you so much.